Renewal plan. We have Chandler Poole from our Office of Economic Development here to give that presentation. So I'll turn it over to Chandler. He's been with the city since, I believe, April or May?
March.
March, okay.
Good morning, Commission members. I'm here to present on the Douglas Avenue Urban Renewal Plan. Let's see if I get this computer to work here right for me. There we go. This is an area that's been looked at for quite a while with a number of different groups. The Douglas Avenue Coalition was formed in 2015 by residents to look at what was going on in the area with business owners and things. It's kind of got the ball rolling. Then in 2016, with the adoption by the city of Plan DSM, the city's comprehensive land use plan, identified some areas in the Douglas Avenue corridor that could be changed over to a little bit more exciting development, if you will. And then in 2020, the Douglas Avenue Corridor Plan was adopted by the City Council, and that's a 2.4-mile stretch from the river on the east all the way to Merle Hay Mall on the west. And it's a very large, and very long, but also very linear area that was studied. But they came up with some great ideas and some good thoughts, and I'm glad that we have that to go off of. We use that as our jumping off point to look at what can we do with the Douglas Avenue Corridor that's not going to take away from the efforts and the excitement and the opportunities that are going on over at Merle Hay, but try to break it into nodes and keep on the east side of the area and have a little more concentrated. This is a map of the area that we came up with. It is the commercial core, if you will, from the river up to Lower Beaver Road. The neighborhood to the north is Lower Beaver, and the neighborhood to the south is Prospect Park. To establish neighborhoods that are they're mature, so they're established, they're stable. However, there's a commercial core that's been highlighted that is not, and it's kind of been forgotten about. It's suffering from a lot of disinvestment and definitely a lot of vacancy. And then with the fire at Plaza Lanes, leaving about a 7-acre site that is now vacant, and we need to figure out something to do with it. So. It's about 105 acres, 110 parcels. This is the existing land use map of the area. It's all relatively commercial. And this is the future land use as proposed by Plan DSM, our comprehensive plan. This is the real rubber meeting the road section here I want to talk about. It's about 105 acres in size, about 110 parcels. Just about half of those are owned by the city or the state in regards to right-of-ways. Little slivers here, roads there, things of that nature. But of the half, 58 or so that are left over, half of those have a property value where the land assessed value is greater than the building assessed value. That's kind of upside down in the development area. And so you're seeing that there's just a tremendous amount of area that's just not, or it doesn't have a lot of potential. I should say potential. A lot going on right now. There's a lot of potential for the future, I believe. Most of the buildings were built between the 50s and the 80s, and as identified in the Douglas Avenue Corridor Plan, the area struggles with vacancy rates, business turnover, property disinvestment, commercial buildings that are tired, obsolete, landscaping throughout the corridor is minimal, definitely a reflection of the 1950s pattern. That's on page 10 of the plan. While it does sound like it's kind of dire in that area, there are some really good things that need to be addressed and enhanced and celebrated, I think, and that is the vehicle counts. My background is in corporate real estate, working with retailers. And 39,000 vehicles per day at that intersection of Douglas Avenue and MLK is a lot of vehicles per day. And then you go over to Lower Beaver Road, it's almost 28,000 vehicles per day. Those are healthy numbers. And so there is a lot of good there, and then of course you have the established neighborhoods to the north and the south. But because of those land values being upside down to the majority of the commercial corridor, that's the real problem that we want to try to solve and try to find a way to have an urban renewal plan, an area which allows us to use TIF to incentivize development, especially since we've had somebody take a look at the Plaza Lane site. They backed away back in about May. Because building costs were going bananas. It was just really, really difficult during that time period. And also we didn't have anything really to offer them in that area. So it's another tool for us to try to incentivize some investment. There's a lot of different bullet points on here. I'm not going to walk through all of them because I could probably go crazy on them. But what I'd like to talk about is that we believe this is appropriate for economic development and a demonstration of slum and blight, as far as the two different designations for urban renewal plan and TIF. We see the increase or an increase in the residential opportunities in the area. We see that there's a need for that in this area. And not just, we believe that the entire socioeconomic strata needs to be addressed as far as housing whenever we go forward and we're trying to look at things. We believe that in this area we should definitely pursue that. While there are a lot of small businesses in the area, it does not mean that we want to run them out by any stretch of the imagination. It means we want to also help them remain and expand. These are small businesses that did take a gamble and they invested in our communities. We want to make sure that as we go through the incentivizing new development and redevelopment, we also have an opportunity to save and promote those small businesses that are in the area. And of course, working on the removal or redevelopment of blighted, obsolete, and underutilized properties in the area. Like I mentioned earlier, this is a 2.4-mile corridor with the Douglas Avenue corridor plan. And by breaking it up into small nodes, we believe we have a much better chance at creating some real development and having an impact in the areas where we are. Merle Hay is doing well in the west. We're going to start this one on the east, and eventually maybe a third one at Beaver Road and Douglas at that intersection. We also view that this would be a bookend, establishing the eastern side of the corridor and playing off and enhancing, encapsulating what's going on in Merle Hay. But we also want to talk about the fact that we want to embrace and enhance and respect the neighborhoods that are to the north and to the south of this corridor. By incentivizing development, what we view is this needs to engage those neighborhoods, not just plop up a commercial building. We want to see housing, but we want also, if there is commercial, we bring in, how are they going to connect to those neighborhoods? How are they going to make sure that people can move back and forth without having to get in their car and go down Douglas? We want to find a way to work with developers to make that happen. Let's see here. And then talking about the urban renewal plan and how it fits with the city's comprehensive land use plan. Foster economic prosperity and stability by retaining existing businesses and recruiting new businesses. That's the goal number one for under economic development. Very happy that we were able to address that. We believe that protecting Des Moines neighborhoods by working to encourage redevelopment, that's community character, goal 2 and 3. And then provided a diversity of housing options to accommodate residents of all ages, income levels, like I said, everybody in the socioeconomic strata. That's housing goal number 1. So we've been working on this for a bit. I really wish that we had this in place a while ago, so maybe the Plaza Lanes redevelopment site could have taken place. But okay, that happened. Now we got to move forward and make it happen now. And go forward as a way to incentivize economic development. NDC, Abby and her group are working with us, moving things forward, possibly with rezoning, looking at rezoning the site to say what would be a little bit more encouraging for the area rather than what Plaza Lanes currently is zoned at. They're going to do the traffic study, geotechnical review, and also, I believe, an environmental review of the site. Working with the property in order to get those things done, in order to help make sure, hey, we've got all these things done already. Now we're going to have a potential for a TIF. Make sure we're trying to be progressive and proactive in efforts to do some redevelopment in the area. With that, I'm happy to sit down. Any questions I can answer for you, please? Sir?
I have a question about the realignment of the traffic lanes from Merle Hay all the way in through Highland Park. I know that's a farther stretch than just the Douglas Avenue Urban Renewal Plan, but what's your take on the realignment of the road and how it has helped traffic calming, if it has, and what's your read on that realignment?
Well, I'm not allowed to play an engineer, not even on TV, but I really don't know how to answer that question because I'm not involved with that. One of the things that we are looking at doing this winter, prior to the holidays and then after the holidays, is meeting with the Highland Park area businesses and asking them what's going on, how did you like it, how did it work for you? Because to me that's really the real reason why that happened with the traffic calming and called the road diet, whatever, is to try to get traffic to slow down and also provide some parking. That's my take, and I've only been here since March. But I'd like to understand what they saw, because they're the ones living it every single day.
I asked the question because I use that stretch quite a bit, and of course, the lanes change, not radically, but they do change, and it takes a while to adjust to the new flow and so forth. Also in Highland Park, and I think that section, say, west of the river has worked out really pretty well, particularly because the asphalt has been, put down and it's a smooth drive. My concern, and if you'd pass this on just as one person's concern to traffic, in Highland Park itself, the bump outs on Euclid there have proved to be, let me say it, a challenge, if not, dangerous. And so I'll be interested to hear if the business people in Highland Park have found that more parking on this corridor has been helpful to them as opposed to other concerns.
So will I. I'll be interested to hear their comments.
And if I could chime in, I think part of the beauty of it is this is a trial run to see how it functions and give it enough time in a trial period where we can move past people adjusting. Because there's always that initial adjustment period where it's new and it's different. You got to give it a little bit of time, let it work for a while, and then start to evaluate, is this working or is it not? And so I think it's great that it's been able to be done, at least as a trial, so we could find out. If I could also, not to interrupt the questions, we can certainly have a lot of time for more questions, but I do want to make sure the commission understands that the item that we're presenting here for the 5:30 is item number, it's related to item 1 on the agenda tonight, on the consent agenda for the commission is charged with finding if the urban renewal plan is in conformance with Plan DSM, the city's comprehensive plan. So just wanted to point that out, make sure that we saw the correlation. So if you had questions on item 1, this would really be the time that we're hoping you can ask those questions.
Yes.
Yeah, you spoke earlier about how the aim is not to push small businesses out of that area who have decided to open there and invest in their community. What are some of the things that will be utilized or that the city can utilize to incentivize them to stay or prevent them from being pushed out?
That's a great question. By having an urban renewal plan and being able to offer up TIF for the property owner, they want to redevelop and enhance their property, there's a possibility there that we can work on something along those lines. I believe there's commercial tax abatement. I'm still not clear with all my maps that I have. But so far as working with the small businesses themselves, I'd probably want to engage. I know it's outside their realm. I really like working with Invest DSMs and the programs that they have. I believe that the city, we have put into our budget another round of the facade grant, small commercial business enhancement. I don't run the program, but I understand we're trying to get that funded again, which I think was a great program, very, very big success. So we'll start figuring out what we can do and working with those businesses. We need to understand what they need, because I can create all the programs in the world, but if they aren't what they want, it's not going to be successful. And so I think that one of the things we need to do is do more engagement. And that'll be, I think, a great task for my department.
Sort of a follow-up to this in a few ways, I guess. Obviously, with the Plan DSM vision statement includes an objective to have sustainable government that recognizes policies that have impacts on quality of life. I'm assuming this is right up that alley, right? So we're saying we're going to hopefully use TIF as an incentive to ensure we're going to have a better community that is, any investment we make in Des Moines returns value to Des Moines, right? TIF typically in cities like ours historically produces inequitable returns from their investments. For example, the Come and Go building when it moved downtown, it's not clear that its residents who pay taxes are paying taxes to Des Moines schools, they're paying taxes to Waukee schools, they're paying for trash and fire in Waukee schools. There are ways within TIF, without being, without changing the law of how TIF works, that we can put residency requirements on, we can put other types of programs, and strategies on that are going to either avoid or minimize that traditional inequity. Like, DMU just left, right? How much investment did we put in for how much we got left? What did Waukee put in, or what did West Des Moines put in? I know the doctors are moving west already anyway, but, what are we doing in this plan to ensure those type of historic investment inequities are not repeated in this TIF-driven investment strategy?
Well, I can't answer about the come-and-go buildings. I don't know the specifics on all of it, but it's a commercial building, and there are residents living there. Most likely what we're going to acquire or pursue in this area are going to be some housing options with commercial on the first floor. That's what we'd like to see. We think that fits really, really well. Now, that inequity piece, yes, TIF may be generated and used to bring a developer in who's going to do a mixed-use development, but the residents of that building pay that real estate tax through their rent. And so they are actually, receiving the benefit, if you will, of new housing in that area. We are going to see the benefit of new businesses coming to the area. And are you asking me to put in stipulations that a business owner must reside in the city of Des Moines in order to receive TIF in this district? Is that what you're asking? I'm not sure.
I'm asking for the plan. Are you saying there's a mandatory amount of residential required in any commercial investment in order to get TIF, or are there other ways? Okay, so because I'm trying to say, so the taxes that support my trash, and that, we got our COVID shot to the county today. It was awesome. Every time I use a city or county service, I'm reminded that our city and county does this so much better than most. If you haven't lived other places, you don't realize how great a job you're doing. We need to figure out how to keep paying you. I'm curious if there's a plan to make sure that we don't put ourselves under budget pressure with programs that repeat some of those, access to some of those budget pressures.
One of the benefits, I've worked in a number of different cities, in North Carolina, Indiana, Illinois, and Iowa. And there's a city ordinance that states that the city will not use more than 75% of the increment generated for development. If we go over that, it has to go in front of a debt review committee. That's wonderful that there are things like this in place, checks and balances and how money is used with TIF. In other cities, it was 5 times what was generated with what's given out. It's like, this is just ridiculous. Here, it's very conservative. And so we always make sure there's always a little bit left over to make sure that, okay, are we going to be over or not? Do we have money left over in case there's something we need to do so far as road repair or anything else under the sun? So the city of Des Moines has a really good system in place to make sure that we are not overextending ourselves in any way, shape, or form. I'm really proud of that fact when I signed on and I heard these things. So when we do a deal, a TIF deal, they may ask for 100%. Well, okay, but what's going to happen is that's going to go in front of the debt review committee to be reviewed. They may say, no, we don't want them to have 100% of the TIF that's generated to go back to them. They may say, we're comfortable with 90% or 80 or at the 75% level. All the TIF districts that we have, I believe right now, average about 50% of TIF being generated is being used. So we don't overextend ourselves to make sure that we have the ability to reinvest back into those neighborhoods if we have to for improvements, whether it be roads or street enhancements or whatever else we do in those areas. So we're very conservative.
And I apologize, so the statistic there was not over 50% of the TIF generated, meaning the potential for deferred taxes that we are issuing away is used. Have we done a study on when we deploy TIF, this is the actual economic return that is defensible? Can we say this actually drives this much more property tax? Can we say we're actually positive? Do we have studies for that in Des Moines with hard numbers?
I don't know. I'm sure the finance department does it. Every time we do a TIF deal through OED, we do a TIF analysis to see what kind of TIF is this going to generate and what kind of anticipated taxes. And then so we have a really good understanding where we're going to negotiate from. So we always have a real good understanding of the taxes generated, and and the taxes going back to the developer to make the development happen.
Okay, have we, so, on two pieces, sorry, so have we done that analysis? Do we know what we're typically generating? And number two, are there any other strategies we should be pushing or recommending that would ensure that if we do all of a sudden see, oh man, this isn't working, this is resulting in inequities, we're now flooding this
Yes.
place with commuters versus not, if we put a distribution center in here, you know, is that really, you know, I mean, Amazon will come in and build us a soccer field maybe, but like, can we actually ensure that we have a catch in this strategy that achieves the objective of sustainable governance that has an impact on overall quality of life? Is there anything else we can do strategically differently than the same thing we've done before?
But I guess what I'd like to interject is that I don't know that the staff that's here tonight is going to be able to answer a lot of your questions. But I would go back to the last council, I believe the last quarterly work session they did, there was a whole presentation on TIF in Des Moines and TIF policy. And we can find that, and that might be a good starting point for the commission to watch that, where the finance director. I would go back to go back, start there, we can provide that to the commission, and then move from that. If there's still more questions, come back to you, forward that on to the right people. I mean, we're doing a 5:30 presentation on a urban renewal plan and trying to decide if it's in conformance with the land use plan or not. We're kind of moving beyond the scope.
Well, no, my argument would be, if it doesn't achieve our vision, it's not clear it's in conformance, right?
Well, we believe that it is in conformance.
Okay.
I mean, that's our recommendation, is it is.
Thank you.
Greg, I just thought I'd do a test. Can you hear us okay? Then if we can, we'll need to be able to hear
Yeah.
him for
Yeah.
voting.
I can hear you well.
Okay, thanks, Greg.
Of the City Plan and Zoning Commission, I'll read the rules and procedures. The Plan and Zoning Commission is generally an advisory body to the City Council. The City Council will hold a public hearing and make the final decision on all matters before the Commission other than site plans and subdivision plats, unless denials or conditional approvals thereof are appealed. Please contact the City Clerk or Development Services Department staff for details on council hearings. Applicant will be given 10 minutes to present the request. Proponents and then opponents from the public are then allowed to speak in that order, with each speaker allowed a maximum of 5 minutes. Applicant is then allowed 5 minutes for a rebuttal. The hearing will then be closed, and the commission will discuss and vote on the issue. All comments are to be germane to the item under consideration, and speakers are to maintain a courteous manner. Items listed on the consent portion of the agenda will not be individually discussed and will be considered for approval in accordance with the recommendation in the staff report, unless an individual present or member of the commission requests that the item be removed from the consent agenda and considered separately under the public hearing agenda. The City of Des Moines is pleased to provide accommodations to individuals or groups with disabilities and encourages participation in city government. Is there a motion to approve the minutes of our last meeting? Chris? All those in favor of approval, raise your right hand. Greg, how do you vote?
Yes.
And are any abstentions? Okay, thank you. Item number 1 on the consent public hearing is a determination as to whether the proposed Douglas Avenue Urban Renewal Plan is in conformance with the Plan DSM Creating Our Tomorrow Plan.
Yes. Are we going to read through the consent agenda? Or?
Yeah,
I didn't know if you were going to.
No,
do
I was just-
anything else. Okay. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to have this item pulled and discussed on the public agenda? Any commissioners? Chris? Okay. Item number 2 is a request from Mid-American Energy Company for vacation of excess East County Line Road right-of-way so that it can be assembled with the adjoining parcel in the vicinity of 2399 East County Line Road. Anyone in the audience wish to have this item pulled from consent? Anyone on the commission? Okay, item 2 remains. And item number 3 is a request from Hernandez Holdings for review and approval of a public hearing site plan Hernandez Law Office for property located at 1451 East Grand Avenue and for a Type 2 design alternatives to waive the requirement to underground existing overhead utility lines. Anyone in the audience who wishes to have this item pulled? Anyone on the commission? And Chris? Pull. Item number 4 is a request from Central Iowa Shelter and Services for review and approval of the public hearing site plan CISS Greenhouse for the property located at 1420 Mulberry Street and for a Type 2 design alternative to reduce the minimum overall height requirement for a downtown general building type in a DX2 district from 3 stories to 1 story. Anyone in the audience wish to have this item pulled from the consent? Anyone on the commission? Okay, item number 4 remains. So item number 2 and 4 All in favor of approving the consent agenda, raise your right hand.
Were you moving that, or? We typically have somebody make a motion on the
Oh,
consent
I'm
agenda.
sorry.
That's okay.
Dory, this is Carolyn. I'll make a motion.
Kristen?
Did you, did,
No, I think,
I'll move consent.
okay.
Sorry.
You did, no, I'm sorry. Okay, now, everyone in favor, raise your right hand. And Greg, what is your vote?
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, items number 2 and 4 approved. We'll start with item number 1 then, and,
Madam Chair, we did have a request for continuance for item number 5.
oh,
We
that's
wanted to
right,
consider
that's
that
right,
first.
sorry. So item number 5 is a request from CFD Properties for property located at 2300 East 14th Street for A, determination as to whether requested rezoning is in conformance with Plan DSM, B, to amend Plan DSM to revise the future land use designation from neighborhood mixed use and low-medium density residential to industrial, and C, rezone property from MX1 mixed use district to I1 industrial district to allow a use that includes outdoor storage. The applicant wished to have this continued to the next meeting on November 8th because they will be holding a neighborhood meeting between now and the November 18th meeting.
Yeah.
Is there a motion to move this to consent?
I'll move. No,
Approve.
continuance.
Yeah, continue it, I'm sorry. I'm more tired than you tonight, Jason. Sorry. Yeah, so all those in favor of moving, continuing this item, please raise your right hand. And Greg, how do you vote?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that's continued to November 18th, so now we will start. We've added item 1 and 3 to the public hearing agenda.
All right.
So we'll start with item 1.
All right, Madam Chair, members of the commission, Bert Drost, planning staff for the city of Des Moines. Item number 1 is a item for the commission needs to make a determination as to whether the proposed Douglas Avenue urban renewal plan that Mr. Poole presented on at 5:30 is in conformance with the Plan DSM, creating our tomorrow plan. And really, the commission's only charged with determining whether it meets the goals of Plan DSM. As Chandler mentioned, the urban renewal plan is located along Douglas Avenue between the Des Moines River and about Lower Beaver Road to the west. Here's a copy of the urban renewal plan that was in your packets. In it, it outlines the goals and objectives that are within Plan DSM that we believe this plan meets. And also in your packet was that the staff recommendation, and in the staff recommendation, we also spelled out all of the different goals that are contained in the Plan DSM land use plan that we feel this plan meets. So I'm not going to read through all of them, but you can see we tried to be pretty detailed in all of the various goals of Plan DSM that it meets, and that relates to goals pertaining to housing, transportation, economic development, public infrastructure and utilities, and community character and neighborhoods. And also social equity there at the end. For the reasons I just mentioned, that it achieves all of these goals, we do believe that the proposed urban renewal plan is in conformance with Plan DSM, so we have recommended approval, or recommended more or less that the commission find it is in conformance with Plan DSM. So, any questions for me?
So the city is the presenting.
Yeah.
Yes.
So, I mean, you can, yeah, there's
Yeah.
nobody besides us other than public comment.
Okay, so is there anybody in the audience who wishes to speak in support of this agenda item? Is there anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? Okay, do we have questions for city staff before we close the public hearing? Okay, we'll now close the public hearing and have time for commissioners to deliberate.
The reason I wanted to pull this off is because we have TIF come up a lot. It's not clear that the impacts of TIF are in line with what we claim they are. There are multiple studies that indicate that TIF, without some broader strategy to how to avoid the economic inequity that comes from investments in one area that do not get realized because we don't actually see that the two residential impacts, the tax increase, are there. I would like to motion that I guess, and this is my question, I'm not sure how we motion that we would like to see some mechanism in here that ensures that we do not end up with the same TIF inequities that we see in other situations. So is that, can we ask for a planning committee? Is it just, what do we do? Because I don't think without some safety valve that says, hey, if this is going the wrong way, we can't keep going and doing the same thing, it doesn't meet the objectives of Plan DSM.
Madam Chair, this is Greg. Can I speak for a minute?
Yes, thank you, Greg.
Jason, you could probably help me out here, but I know in the past, and it's been a while, I remember Matt and Aaron Olson Douglas, maybe in some of their earlier roles, gathering information for city council and putting together, for lack of a better term, sort of proof in the pudding about TIF packages that were done, 10 years ago, and once they had finished their period, and taxes were then generated, they did some sort of analysis. Do you remember this?
I don't remember that specifically. I know that there's been a lot of yearly presentations and discussions on TIF, how it works, how we use it in Des Moines, the cautions that we approach it with. We can do a couple different things. I mean, we could, certainly, one, try to gather what we can. I'd mentioned the recent presentation to the council I don't know if that was recorded or not, would be available. We could also have a future 5:30 session for the commission where we just have one of those presentations with OED staff where we kind of talk a little bit about TIF in Des Moines. How does it work here? I don't have, I think that's of value for everybody.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Any other comments?
Is there a report that is accessible on what the actual economic benefit has been of our TIF investment? I mean, is not a report somewhere?
Commission, Glenna Frank, Legal Department. So in addition to serving this commission and its staff, I also serve the Economic Development Office as counsel. So I have some information that might be helpful. Each project, so again, this wouldn't be on a plan basis at the adoption of plan, but each project that would receive TIF in that plan, for each project an analysis is done. So our finance department is involved. The city staff and the Economic Development Office review the pro forma and a variety of other financial information about each project when recommending an amount or percentage of TIF to be granted. And as Chandler mentioned, that if it reaches a certain threshold, then it goes to the debt review committee, which is made up of finance and representatives of other departments for their input. And so then when the final project agreement goes to the city council, every council communication that is made public on the city's website and is available to the public contains a short table that shows the value of the property today, the value of the property with the proposed project, the amount of TIF assistance that will be given, and then the ultimate tax revenue that the city will receive. And I believe that's like a current 5, 10, maybe even 20-year period. So it has those rows showing the anticipated revenue. So that, I don't know that that's done on a plan-wide basis, although I think it may be, but it is definitely done on a project basis as those projects come for approval within the plan. So I don't know, Mr. Draper, if that answers your question, but that's the best, most on-point information that I can provide. I am not personally aware of studies that show the inequities, so that might be something that would be helpful to provide to the Economic Development Office, but I would share that as well.
Thank you, Glenna. Any other comments?
Can we move that this include a return on investment analysis of all TIF investments made in the past 5 years be published before we identify this as in conformance?
I mean, the commission can make any sort, you can make a recommendation to the city council that includes what you think is warranted. You can also, sometimes the commission is on action, on items, not necessarily, this one, but just items in general, moved something, offered, made a recommendation, but separate from the recommendation, their motion also included a request, similar to what you're saying, that be looked at, something be looked at, or, like I said, I really do think a great starting point, if the commission is interested in understanding TIF in Des Moines better, that we have a 5:30 presentation just on TIF, where we can have the right staff here that can kind of get the commission up to speed as to what we actually do. I mean, right now I feel like we're I don't know that we can answer your questions. I feel like we're making assumptions without really looking at the facts. And so what I'd like to do is have a base level of training for the commission in a 5:30 session that says, this is what we actually do in Des Moines, and then jump into more of the kind of questions that you're bringing up from the more policy, city-wide policy kind of thing.
Okay, then I would recommend, and we can shoot this down if we want, I would recommend that this plan require a 5-year look-back return on investment analysis following implementation. Can we at least do that? So that's nothing we need to do today. In 5 years, we need to know if this thing actually did what it said it was going to do. Because this is a location in our city where investment in TIF here should actually work well. This isn't going to be a heavy commuter area. This isn't going to have, we aren't going to be cannibalizing this area. This should be a good example of its use, where other regions may not be. I'd like to at least make sure we're opening the door to and analyzing whether or not what we're planning to do works.
Sure.
Is there some kind of schedule going forward in the implementation of this plan, in terms of when the council would look at it, when businesses would be able to apply for it? Is there a timeline that's been established?
You want? Maybe, if you could just speak a little bit to how would it go about getting implemented? What's the time frames, those things?
Sure. This body is one of the steps that we have to take to seek approval for an urban renewal plan. We're looking at council approving the plan and establishing urban renewal area on December 6th. And then what that does is allows us then to have the ability to work with a developer. All TIF that we do in this area, actually all TIF, the TIF that we've been starting to go forward with is project generated TIF. What that means is there's no money generated or going anywhere until development is done and fully assessed. And then we start working on, then the TIF increment and the incentive plan kicks in. So it's not just like it keeps generating, keeps generating, keeps generating. It allows us to work with the developer and say, if you want to build this and what you're telling us and all the documentation you show us says it'll be X number of dollars, and we work with the county to get an idea of, is this going to assess at what we think it'll be? That's when we do our assessment, and it goes to finance and everyone else to take a look at it. It does not start generating until that project is fully built and assessed. And that still gives us, I think, what, a year and a half in arrears and how it works. So it's quite a bit of a ways out there before a project really starts to see any type of benefit of TIF coming forward.
Jen,
Okay, well-
please.
Madam Chair, this is Greg. Can I
Go ahead, Greg.
jump in?
Go ahead, Greg.
I sort of feel like there's two issues on the table, if I'm understanding this right. One is this urban renewal plan at Douglas and MLK a plan that we believe staff and we believe that it supports what an urban renewal plan should do? And then the second topic is whether it's this urban renewal plan or any urban renewal plan in the city, whether or not I don't even know what the parameters or guidelines are, but whether or not they are being looked at in the rear and there's data provided that says they're providing the economic growth that we want, the equity that we want, all these things that I don't even know if that's written down, but things that, so I feel like they're two different topics. I think at the moment our commission's charged with, does this plan meet what staff is charged with meeting? And I would say yes. The second topic is something that I think Jason and others are suggesting that we all will dig in harder and get up to speed and ask the right questions. And I think we could just give Jason some suggestions, not directions, but, can you please do what you're suggesting and get us up to speed? And Chris, you can help lead us. And but I think they're separate.
Go ahead.
To follow up on Greg's comments, has the Urban Design Review Board seen this?
Yes, they approved it on October 19.
So that's, having been on that board, that's where the implementation of TIF and economic development really kind of come together.
With plan review and
Yeah.
the developed, yes.
And I do know, Greg, I don't know if you were on the board at that time, but there have been some really simplified presentations on how TIF is performed in certain TIF districts in Des Moines.
Maybe that's what I'm remembering. I just remember that. Yep.
Yeah, you can't use downtown as an example. That it's too complicated. I think there are some other areas, Southridge and others, where you can see where it's been a benefit. And there's also examples where it has not. And so I think there are presentations available, and staff, I know city staff has done those in a way that's understandable, because this is a Pandora's box of issues. So I think Greg is right. I think we're tasked with, does this meet the overall criteria of Plan DSM as one issue, and the economic one is, I don't know that's what we're being asked to do tonight. But
We have a motion on the floor, right? So do we need to act on that? or-
We don't have a motion, we've had discussion.
Anyway, I guess my other question being to Will's question, how long does it take before you can reasonably evaluate the effectiveness of the program? So you say 5 years doesn't work, how many years works?
I can't answer that because we don't know when the next development will hit.
Right. It's all dependent on the developers
Yeah.
coming in and taking advantage of the development agreements.
Is there anything we can do to tie in here some future analysis? Like, is there any reasonable amount of time we can give or any trigger we can start with? Because I know I am actually very familiar with this.
To me, I really think that's a citywide policy issue that should be set by the city council and not just for this specific urban renewal TIF district. It's a citywide issue, and I think that's why the presentations that have been given to urban design have looked at multiple renewal areas. And we can do something, if the commission's interested, I think we can have that same kind of presentation provided to the commission. But ultimately, how TIF is done in Des Moines is city council, it's their policy that they're setting.
And I may be oversimplifying it a little bit, but I think in every project analysis, there are checks and balances to say, what are they proposing, and their ask of the TIF, is it upside down or not? And there's kind of economic development does that analysis project by project within each district. And that's the check and balance I think you're asking for, is like,
Yeah.
is the benefit going to be there with the investment these people are intending to make?
I think it's important, just to piggyback on that, that every TIF, every development agreement that has TIF in it, every one of those is getting looked at by the Urban Design Review Board. First is staff, then they're making a recommendation to Urban Design Review Board, they're looking at it, and then they're making a recommendation to City Council, and ultimately council has to decide, is this a good deal for Des Moines or not? And then they approve each one individually. This isn't it's not like, a by right kind of thing, where if I check these 3 boxes, I get TIF.
I'm not making comments out of a lack of understanding of the process. What I'm making the comments out of is, it doesn't seem to be here. You're saying, does this meet Plan DSM? Tons of stuff. I actually read the paper. I get it, love the report, awesome, tons of good stuff. I think this project is a great one. I think we should invest in this place. I think this is a section of town I'm sort of disappointed that isn't as more successful as it could be given its location and history. At the same time, the question is, a major pillar of Plan DSM is that our investments are sustainably and smartly deployed. It's not clear to me that we have seen data that demonstrates that this is a clearly appropriate smart deployment of the primary mechanism of this plan. The primary economic driving mechanism of this is just not clear to me. So I won't waste everyone's night all night, but I do have to say, though, that it is not clear to me that we can say, honestly, without data, that this actually meets the objectives. Even though we've hit all the others, sustainable economic impact is one that's important. Even though in this one, I bet this will work. I just don't know why we have an aversion to actually making sure we're requiring us to collect the data to prove that this one, of all the ones that are boundary ones, this one could work, should work.
Anyone wish to make a motion?
I move staff report.
Okay, everyone in favor of staff, please raise your right hand. And Greg, how do you vote?
Yes.
And any opposition? Oh, okay, thank you.
Chair, I have a suggestion. There were a couple of comments that recommended a 5:30 for the commission to discuss exactly what Chris has been talking about. And I think that would have utility. Whether it would answer the question, about this or not, I don't know, but still.
Can you hit your mic? Turn your microphone on?
It is on, but my mask is heavy, so.
You just have to, yeah.
My recommendation was that there be a 5:30 session for P&Z to discuss this exact issue.
More than happy to contact the right staff and see what we can do on that.
Yeah,
I think it's a wise use of time.
Yeah, we have a 5:30 session on November 18 on the south of Grays Lake master plan, but possibly on December 2nd or December 16. We could see about getting that.
And then there was also the recent presentation to the council. You said we might be able to share that as well?
Yeah, I can look in to see if that is available online. It may not be, but I'll double check.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we're ready for item number 3.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Burt Drost, planning staff for the city of Des Moines. Item number 3 is a request for a public hearing site plan where they've requested waiver of the requirement to underground the overhead utilities. The subject property is located on the south side of East Grand Avenue at the intersection with East 15th Street. So it's just a couple blocks to the east of the state capitol building. It's an existing one-story office building. I have a couple photos here that might provide some insight. So here's the building along, as it's viewed along East Grand Avenue. This next photo here is viewed from East 15th Street, and it shows the overhead utilities that they would be required to bury. So you can see there is a significant amount of utilities on this site that they would be required to bury. Just moving forward, or I guess fast forward, the estimate provided by Mid-American is that it would cost over $200,000 to bury these utilities, where the total project cost is $300,000. So that utility burial represents 66% of the actual project cost, or a 66% overage of that budget. So here's the site plan that they've provided. You can see they are doing some landscaping and some street trees along East Grand Avenue and other site improvements. So it will be an improvement over what's there today. In our staff recommendation, we detail that $200,000 estimate from Mid-American, as well as the $300,000 project cost estimate provided by the applicant. And we have recommended approval, just given the significance of the cost. And then here's the estimate provided by Mid-American that shows it would cost in excess of $200,000. And then here's the letter from the applicant's consultant filing the request for the Type 2 design alternative. And we did not receive any consent cards, either in support or in opposition. And then that concludes my presentation. Any questions for me?
Okay. Thank you. The applicant, come forward, state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Doug Saltzgaver, Engineering Resource Group, 2413 Grand Avenue, Des Moines. I think the presentation covered everything. I'll just answer any questions you may have.
No questions this time? Okay. Anyone else who wishes to speak in support of the application? Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to speak in opposition? Okay. Any further questions for staff at this point? Okay, if not, we'll close the public hearing and give time for deliberation.
This is, for me, this is the same thing from 3, 6, 7, 8 are the same one, so I'll only identify the issue once, but I'll propose the same motion for each one, which is consistent with what we discussed last week. It's a quick summary. In 57 days, the Development Director will be delivering recommendations on how to ensure the economic burden of safeguarding Mid-American's utility delivery, protecting our citizens' access to power, our businesses' operations, our tree canopy for modification. In 57 days, we should have a recommendation of here's better ways to do this more equitably. My argument has been consistently, by now I am nothing but consistent in some cases, waiving these requirements when a multi-year effort said that these are desired ordinances continues to damage our ordinances, risks the perception of arbitrariness, and is not sure to produce equitable results. We need 57 days. If we give staff that time to do that, we should see recommendations that should hopefully ensure that the economic burden of complying with this ordinance is more appropriately shared between those stakeholders. So the same thing here on this, and I'll have the same recommendation on all the others, is I would move staff except for, I would, instead of waiving, defer for 3 years the requirement to comply with 135.921E. So I'm sorry, my motion is to move staff except, instead of waiving, defer for 3 years the requirement to comply with 135.921E.
Any discussion on the motion? So all those in favor of the motion on the floor, raise your right hand. One. And all those opposed, raise your right hand. And Greg, what's your vote?
No.
No? Okay, that motion failed. Is there another motion?
Madam Chair, I would move staff.
Okay, Greg has moved staff. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor of staff, please raise your right hand. And Greg made the motion, so are you also voting yes?
Yes.
Okay, and those that are opposed, please raise your right hand. Okay, so 2 in opposition, Greg. So the motion passes. So we are now ready for item number 6.
Madam Chair and members of the Commission, Shreyoshi Chakraborty, planning staff for the City of Des Moines. So the item before you, item number 6, is a public hearing site plan for a property that's on 2551 Douglas Avenue. And the applicant is requesting type 2 design alternatives and is requesting a couple different waivers. So before I start off, I'll just orient you a little bit to where the property is located. So you can see right here, 2551 Douglas Avenue. It's directly west of the intersection of Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway and Douglas Avenue. And it's on a fairly busy commercial corridor. It has a mix of uses around. The property itself is zoned MX3. And there's the surrounding uses are commercial, office spaces, and other mixed uses of similar nature. So the applicant is proposing to make a few improvements to the site. The current use of the site is an auto repair type business. And they're proposing to move in a new user. The new user is proposing to continue with the existing auto repair shop, but they are intending on adding vehicle display as well as vehicle sale on the property. So here's a site plan, and you can see some of the improvements that are proposed here. So currently they have, they're proposing to have 12 parking spaces, and 50% of those, about 6 of those, they are proposing for display, and the other 6 are to be used for customer as well as employee parking. They're also proposing a few other improvements to the site, including some landscaping right here that you can see. So I'll move on to the staff recommendation here. So staff is in support of the 2 waiver requests. The first one is that they are seeking that any portion of the property to be used for outside storage, display, and parking of vehicles, for vehicles sales display, lot is required to be at least 1/2 acre of land. And as you might have seen, the property is about 0.425 acres, so it's fairly small. And the second waiver that they are requiring is for placement of all electrical, telephone, cable, utility system underground. So staff is in support of these 2 waivers, with the additional condition for the first waiver to only allow 3 parking spaces for display. So if I'll just go back to the site plan again. So as you can see, the site here, the staff is proposing that these 3 parking spaces be used for vehicle display, And the reason being that this lot is fairly small and tight in terms of circulation and parking. And by having 6 parking spaces dedicated to vehicle display, that could create circulation and parking issues within the site. And by having just 3 of these spots available for display, that should ease up some of that issue with circulation and parking. Other than that, staff is supportive of the request, and let's see, we did receive some comment cards, and I'll move on to that. We received one comment card from an adjacent property owner who is not in support of this particular use. We also received a letter outlining their concerns with this particular use. In summary, they are concerned that there are quite a few vehicle sales and similar uses along the corridor, and this would just add to more of those. Additionally, they have also noticed some towing activities within the site, and there's some pictures here to show you here in a second. And so they're concerned about vehicle storage and towing activities within the site in the future along a shared easement that they have. So this is just a continuation of the concerns, which also outlines some of the issues with the easement area itself, with people utilizing the easement as walking down to the grocery store or to the bus stop, or just simply kids playing in that area, as there's some residential area to the north of that particular site. So here you can see some pictures. There's a towing truck, and this is the easement that I was talking about. So there's a towing truck right there. And some vehicle storage, again, the towing truck stored over there. And a couple more pictures here. Additional vehicles stored behind the property. And so I would like to point out that there are some supplemental use regulations that do apply towards minor vehicle maintenance repair use in MX3 district. So those would apply to this property. And additionally, the storage of 2 or more inoperable motor vehicle will constitute junk or salvage yard use, which is prohibited in this particular zone district. So with that, that's the end of my presentation. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to take them.
If I could just, I think one thing that maybe got glossed over was the estimated cost for the utilities from Mid-Am. The project cost to do the landscaping here, because again, this is a minor, they're switching uses, but they're relative, basically leaving the building alone. The project value we had was $5,400. And the utility cost was estimated at $85,000 to $100,000. So that's the basis of our recommendation of waiving that in this particular case.
Any questions from the commission?
What was the trigger of this review? Why is this here?
Change of use. The Chapter 135, if you change use, so moving to the vehicle sale. So if they were just doing the repair, they wouldn't be here. They wouldn't have to have done a site plan if they were just continuing the repair use.
So with that change of use, I mean, right now it sounds like there's issues with what's here. Do you believe this plan is going to prevent or reduce the issues that the neighbors are complaining about?
I think their operations, I mean, I think the good question for the applicant is how long have they been operating there currently? There was a previous operator. I'm assuming that what you took pictures of is the new operator, but I'd want to have that clarification as to the history.
Yes, the pictures are current pictures. They are not, but that can be clarified as well. That was provided by, I don't know if we have.
So the pictures were not pictures you took?
No, I did not. It was submitted by the same person who was in opposition.
So we don't know the dates of those necessarily. I mean, hopefully they're here tonight, maybe you can share that with us, but we don't know if that is current or the previous operator.
I believe in the letter, they mentioned that they noticed that very recently when they took the pictures.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully the neighbors here can speak on their own behalf, and then the applicant can maybe address how they plan to operate on site. I do think that's part of the rationale for us recommending a very limited display areas, because it is a small site, and there's going to be a need for customer vehicles, and so we wanted to ensure that the site could function, and that's the basis of the recommendation for that. But there's always ongoing enforcement issues, but anyway, I'd like to see what the applicant has to say about.
I have a question for staff. I received 2 letters in opposition to this change from an auto repair shop to a used car lot. Did you receive those letters? One from the Lower Beaver Association, another from the owner of the old Plaza Bowl.
As far as I'm aware, this is the only letter we received was from the adjacent property owner at 2025 Douglas. We did not receive any other letters.
Thank you.
Francis, were those directed to you? Okay. I just wanted to make sure if it was titled to the commission in general, maybe there might have been a mistake, but if it was directed to you, it could just be that they sent them specifically.
Any other questions for staff? Okay, thank you then. And if the applicant can come forward, please state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Doug Saltzgaver, Engineering Resource Group, 2413 Grand Avenue, Des Moines. The applicant is leasing the building, and his primary operations are small auto repair, fixing a radiator, changing batteries, alternators, things like that, not large-scale overhauls. He does have a dealer's license, and he said those 3 stalls that would be limited to display is fine. He said he doesn't sell that many cars. That's not his primary business. Occasionally, he comes across a customer that wants to sell the vehicle. He can then buy it and then resell it. He's not looking to stack the property with 15 or 20 vehicles for sale. Again, his primary business is auto repair. And from what he's telling me, in those photos, the vehicles behind the building are not related to his business. There's another auto repair operation in close proximity, and apparently some of those cars end up right behind that building. And the property line is not very far north of that building, so those vehicles are not even on this subject property.
So, and Doug, did you say the applicant is in agreement with all the staff recommendations?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Bert, maybe flip to the aerial. And I was looking at the aerial on my computer that, although you don't see cars there, but you can see where the property line is, how close it is to the back of the building. There you go, feet 2 probably. Just to help give you some depth on the pictures you're looking at.
So yes, that yellow line is the property line, and the area right north of it is where those photos taken by a neighbor indicated there were quite a few vehicles back there, and those had nothing to do with the applicant's business.
Okay. There's no questions? Thank you then.
Yep.
Okay. Are there any others present who would like to speak in support of this project? Is there anyone present who would like to speak in opposition? Please come forward, state your name, and you have 5 minutes to speak.
My name is Carol Maher. I live in Ward 3, zip code 50312. I rode by this property, and I congratulate them on putting in a new bike pad for a new bike rack. Unfortunately, the bike rack is not attached to the bike pad, and it's for little kids' bikes. So it's sort of C+ for effort, but it'd be really great if it was not a bike rack that you put at a grade school. And you should connect it. It looks like the out front parking lot is brand new. It has the handicap spot, new striping, looks really great. So thank you. Unfortunately, all the existing landscaping is dead. So, and I know some of that was pointed out on the site plan, but I hope that the applicant commits to keeping the new landscaping alive, because that makes a big difference. And currently, when I was there actually 2 days ago, there were cars parked on the east side of the building, not in spots. They were parked perpendicular to the spot, so that sort of looks kind of shabby. So I believe the first item on the agenda was sexing up Douglas Avenue, and I think this area is in that urban renewal plan area, I believe. So it'd be really great if we start with properties like this that are making an investment to make them look a little better. And also, maybe it's an opportunity to spend a boatload of that money in undergrounding all of those utilities and making that a much more friendly spot to walk, ride your bike, get the bus, do business, because it would really, because the poles there are huge. So, thank you.
Okay. Thank you.
Are we able to ask her a clarifying question? Or
Yes.
so when you're saying that the cars were there along the east side, so you're saying the cars were double parked in that right of way that the pictures were taken of earlier?
I can show you the picture if you want.
So I mean, like right there, so they were double parked inside the yellow line on the right?
Yeah, they were
of the building?
inside. They were like along this, I think this area right here, the landscaped area, they were parked along there.
The picture under here.
Oh.
And if those are neighbor complaints, is there recourse for that, or what?
I mean, there's a couple of different avenues. I would start with our zoning enforcement staff to try to determine if there's a legitimate use on the site. You know, is the use legitimate first? And then after that, is there a site plan of record, and are they in conformance with that site plan?
There it is.
Because if they're not in conformance with the site plan, they have to bring the site. You have to actually maintain your site in conformance. So if you have landscaping that dies, you're obligated to replace it. Now, you know, enforcement is typically on complaint basis, just because of the volume. But so even the current, if there's a current site plan that wouldn't include the vehicle display, and that landscaping was required with that site plan, that they need to replace the dead plant material, even if they walked away from car sales.
This is the rack. It's not attached, and it's for little kids' bikes, but it's a strong effort. And that, I didn't realize that wasn't part of their property, but that's gravel back there. Thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition to this request? Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 5 minutes.
Hi, my name is Randy Thompson, owner of Plaza Lanes property. We are one of the largest stakeholders in that area, in land, and we are currently trying to market that area with CB Ellis and Bill Wright from CB Ellis. Spoke to Bill the other day about the notice I got in the mail on this item, and he said, you know, when we've got 5.9 acres behind that area, And he said it's going to be awful tough to market that when there's used cars on that lot beside us. You're overlooking it. Whether we have apartments in there, hotels is one of the things that we're thinking about. It's going to be tough, hopefully, not to mention the tip, but hopefully that will come through. Hate to throw that in there, but I just wanted to let you know, the Douglas Coalition, we've spent 3 years, and I'm on that coalition board, trying to develop that area too, also, which was mentioned to you earlier, I'm sure. Missed that beginning of that presentation, but we are spending a lot of time and money trying to do that, and that does not set into the plan, obviously. We're trying to make that a place that we're proud of. I'm also the vice president of the Iowa Bowling Proprietors, which has a building just north of there. And that particular building, a letter was sent today to Frances and Carolyn from the Iowa Bowling Proprietors, Bev Van Blair. And what she mentioned is that they have a tough time with their clients, with our members, getting out on Douglas because there are so many cars, especially in the winter now. It's been less the last 2 or 3 weeks, but parked cars along that east side, which is on that, obviously that side. This morning, I kind of drove it and took a picture for Bev, and with this copy, that car, she said, has been sitting there for 3 weeks. So I just wanted to let you know that other car is also on their lot. That fence right over where the other car is up on Jack's, that is my lot on the other side. They own to there. So they've got 2 cars stranded out there. The other car's damaged. Don't know how long that's been there, but the other car, the GMC, does not have any license plates, and nothing wrong with that, but obviously it's been there for 3 weeks. So nobody can get out during the winter, especially when snow is there. They don't move their cars. This is what comes from Bev Van Blair. So I ask you not to give this variance. I think it would be bad for the area, bad for what we've done the last 3 years for our coalition, and it won't do anything to help market the Plaza Lanes 5.9 acres. Any questions?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else who wished to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Jeremy Gertis. I live at 4019 Lower Beaver Road. I am the president of the Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association. Our association discussed this agenda item in great length over the last couple of weeks, and we resolved to oppose this for a number of reasons. I wrote a letter which you, sir, have received, and I would just read that because it outlines what we're talking about. Greetings. The Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association would like to express its opposition to the proposed variances which would allow used car sales at 2551 Douglas Avenue. For more than 20 years, the Lower Beaver Neighborhood Association has endeavored to advocate for the residents and businesses along Douglas Avenue between the Des Moines River and Beaver Avenue. Starting in 2011, our neighborhood participated in the city's neighborhood revitalization program and developed a comprehensive plan to, among other things, support vibrant, viable businesses, new and old. Stemming from this commitment, the LBNA was a founding member of the Douglas Avenue Coalition, which has advocated for the revitalization of the Douglas Avenue commercial corridor. The Douglas Euclid corridor near Martin Luther King Jr. Parkway has encountered numerous challenges over the years. Older, awkwardly sized, and poorly maintained buildings create significant turnover among businesses in the area. The challenges were compounded in December 2017 when fire destroyed Plaza Lanes, the principal anchor of this commercial node. Since then, the challenges have only increased, and between return on investment metrics and property valuations, it's proven very difficult to attract parties interested in purchasing and redeveloping the vacant Plaza Lanes property and other nearby lots as well. In recent months, the LBNA has been greatly encouraged by a number of public and private entities that have come together to kickstart the redevelopment of this area.
In fact, the agenda for this evening's meeting included, number one, the Douglas Avenue Urban Renewal Plan, which focuses on this very portion of the Douglas-Euclid corridor. The proposed variance to allow Sheldon Holdings to expand their business to include used car sales at 2551, we believe is directly contrary to the objectives of our neighborhood, the city planning office, the urban renewal plan, and more. Real estate professionals have long held that used car sales lots typically lower the value of nearby properties and make an area less attractive to developers. Additionally, the planned DSM future land use map designates the area in question for community mixed use. Under this plan, a community mixed use unit will include both a mix of residential densities and a mix of retail and service establishments designed to attract customers from a large service area encompassing multiple neighborhoods and may include specialty retail that attracts regional customers. Simply put, we do not believe that a used car lot is consistent with these objectives. We are particularly concerned about the possible impact of a used car lot on our efforts to redevelop the former Plaza Lanes site into a mixed-use development, which will almost certainly include a residential component. Finally, we would observe that there are already no less than 3 used car lots within sight of this property. We see no need for yet another used car lot in this portion of the Douglas-Euclid corridor. Therefore, the LBNA strongly opposes the requested waivers and urges the commission members to deny their approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else who wishes to speak in opposition?
If I could, sir, would we be able to get a copy of your letter just to have in our record?
Yes, sir.
Thank you. I mean, you can email it to us later. Thank you.
Okay, are there any questions for city staff at this time, commissioners? If not...
I do have a question.
Okay.
For staff. And you can correct me if I'm wrong, but wasn't the auto repair use, didn't it have incidental sales, or was that the old code?
I think that might have been under the old code. The new code doesn't allow for that.
Thanks.
And kind of along those same lines, I think just to reiterate, like this property has the rights to be a vehicle repair use. It's the fact that they want to sell vehicles is what's considered the change in use. And I know Shiroshi had mentioned this too, but as a vehicle repair shop, they're only allowed to have 3 cars on site per bay. So in this instance, they have 2 bays, so they would only be allowed to have 6 vehicles on site awaiting repair, and those all have to be licensed. And I would also point out that if they would ever have more than 1 inoperable vehicle on the property, meaning it had been in an accident, it's not drivable. If it's more than 1, so 2 or more, we would consider that to be a junk or salvage yard. And since this property is owned MX3, that's not a permitted use. So there has been some zoning enforcement. Zoning enforcement has taken a look at this. And then I'd also point out that if there are more than 1 junk or more than 1 inoperable vehicle, that the neighbors can always call the Neighborhood Inspections Division, and they can do an impound on the property as well.
And if I could, to piggyback on some of the information that Bert is providing, I do want to make sure everybody understands that as staff, when we looked at this, MX3 allows the auto sales use. The issue here is that they don't meet the half-acre site plan standard, and so that's what they're needing relief of. And I think it's fair for the commission to decide whether whether this is the right time to waive that. That's a fair question, but I just want to make sure that we understand that we're not like granting use variance kind of relief that maybe the zoning board of adjustment, we're not looking at a rezoning. This is really a site plan standard and a question of, is this site big enough to allow some vehicle sales?
So did they come to you because they want to sell cars, or did they come to you and say, we are an auto mechanic shop and we might sell a car or 2, but our main purpose is not to do such?
They're in the process, or here tonight, because they have expressed, their desire to sell vehicles, and so that's what triggered the site plan. So we wouldn't be here, if they were just going to continue on with the auto repair use, there would be no site plan other than the one that's on the books property already.
And Mr. Saltzgaber can correct me if I'm wrong, but it's possible that they were wanting to get a dealer's license. In order to get a dealer's license through the state, they have to get a zoning letter, and that zoning letter would require the site plan.
But it's my understanding he already has a dealer's license.
Okay.
Doug, right? Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
But for a different site? Yeah.
Does staff feel that this use is within the Plan DSM and within the Douglas plan? So this is something that you feel we're approving because this fits in what we've been presented on first?
By limiting it to 3 vehicles, we feel it does. Initially they had wanted 6 stalls for a vehicle display, and we felt that was too intense. But we felt that allowing them to have 3 stalls for vehicle display was more reasonable and less of an impact.
Again, the use is allowed by the current zoning, and so what went into our thinking is with that restriction, like Bert was saying, that if you limit it to just the 3 stalls, it's really accessory to the use that's already there, that's permitted, and we felt that that was reasonable to allow them to have the sales as almost accessory to our code doesn't allow the sales to be accessory to a repair, but by default, that's what we would be doing here if we have just three spaces up front, is it's really still just a repair business. I was involved with the Douglas Avenue planning effort. It has very big visions that I am excited about that are much, very urban, walkable focus. But those things happen over time, and as staff, we looked at this and we say, hey, it's zoned X3, this is a permitted use, they're there. If it's accessory, maybe, it makes sense to support the request. And again, going back to the beginning of the presentation, if this was a half acre in size, we wouldn't be here tonight on this, maybe the utilities. But the only reason the question on the vehicle sales is before the commission tonight is because this is 0.4 something acres. So those are all the different factors that went into staff's thinking of what our recommendation was.
Do we know if the number of parking spaces, so if you're allowed basically 6 vehicles at a time, we're going to have at least 2 mechanics, now we have 3 spaces in the front, and there's only 11 parking spaces on the site. Do we believe that the current parking number of parking spaces are sufficient to prevent the double parking and blocking that we'll see that people are complaining about?
Well, the site plan requires just 5 off-street parking spaces, and they provide 12. So that was, I think, their justification for proposing to have 6 display spaces, because as far as zoning or planning and design ordinance would require, they're only required to provide 5 off-street parking spaces, but they have 12. So,
we have this complies with our parking standards, but it's always possible for people to operate in a manner that our site standards can't control, or beyond what you can look at and control with the site plan. There's a reality of and that's why we have enforcement staff, because it's an ongoing part of the business in what we do. So, can we say definitively that this site plan is going to force them to operate better than what's been observed? No. But does this site plan comply with our standards and our requirements? Yes. From a regard of parking and maneuvering spaces. And, we have to, you can't assume a violation. You have to give somebody the right to operate. And then if they do have a violation, then you enforce on them after the fact. It's just the nature of law. But anyway.
Jason, I have a question. If there were the full half acre, how many cars would they be able to have on the lot for sale?
You know, I don't know if you had a little bit more space, how much you could get on this particular site. It would, and I'm assuming you're saying this site with this building sitting in that spot. I mean, certainly if you were developing this new and had a smaller building, you could get a lot more building, or a lot more cars there in there. But, you know, maybe an additional, I couldn't even think, was it a tenth? It's less than a tenth of an acre. I mean, maybe you get a few more cars.
Yeah, the parking requirement, though, is derived by the size of the building, not necessarily the size of the parcel. So if it's a 2,751 square foot building, it's going to require just 5 off-street parking spaces, regardless of how big the parcel is.
And that's in addition to display. So display, you don't get credit for the parking from your display area.
So with the current layout, the current building, if it was half an acre, we wouldn't be looking at the vehicle sales. They could get 7 stalls for display with the current layout.
Yes.
Correct.
And maybe that's what Will is asking. I apologize if that. Thanks, Johnny.
Any additional questions for staff? If not, the applicant has 5 minutes for rebuttal.
Regarding the dead landscaping, we're aware of that. The applicant has looked at putting replacement trees in, but right now is not a really good time to plant new trees and hope that they would survive the winter. So he has asked for a deferral until next spring. I think he's taken care of quite a few of the items. I think that bike rack might be a placeholder. I know he said he had a couple things on order, so hopefully he's got a better bike rack on its way that he can bolt down. Regarding the, as Bert mentioned, the number of vehicle display stalls, when I put a note on the first submittal, I can't remember if I had 6 or 7, something like that. I didn't speak with the applicant about what he needs. But when I called and asked him, they want to limit you to 3. He said, that's fine. He said, a lot of times they only have 1 or 2 anyway that I'd try to sell. So again, he's not looking to flood the site with used cars. If he has an opportunity to buy and resell a car, he does that, but that's not the majority of his business. And yeah, see, so maybe 2 or 3 cars for sale parked up there on the front, but again, the majority of his work is going to be mechanical repair, and it's not a body shop. It's, as I mentioned, smaller mechanical issues, and so there should not be junked vehicles that have considerable body damage that are inoperable that have been in an accident, because that would not be something that he would be working on. Answer any questions you may have.
Okay. There are no questions. Thank you, Doug.
Oh, and I might say that, sorry, this building is really set up for a small auto repair shop. A little bit of an office up front, and then the repair bays in the back. I don't know what other use it would be. And looking at the future revitalization along Douglas, is this going to be here for a long time? Probably not. Again, the person operating the business is a tenant, so I would assume that if someone came in and wanted to buy the former bowling alley and some other properties around, that the current property owner would probably be interested in selling it. So, but in the meantime, it'd be nice to have something there operating as a business instead of a vacant, empty building that then gets vandalized and run down even more. Thank you.
If this request is denied, will this actually impact their current operation, or will they be able to keep continuing operating as normal? You're mentioning, so we'd like to keep the business going.
Yeah.
It sounds like there's a risk that it goes away if this doesn't change. It doesn't sound like that's actually what's happening here. It'll still be a repair shop primarily. We just
Correct.
won't necessarily have a few cars up front to sell. Is that accurate, or am I missing your point there?
I know he really wants to be able to sell cars as he comes across them. But I wish he was here tonight. He couldn't make it to answer that question. If this is denied, if he would have to find another site that he could sell cars. I'm sorry, I can't answer that for you, sir. But his staff has said he would certainly have the right to, even if we're denied, he can still operate as a auto repair business.
Okay. Thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Okay, I think we can close the public hearing now and have discussion among the commissioners.
So,
I'd like to comment that I think, oh, go ahead, Carolyn. I would just like to think that having this as the waiver, I'm not in favor of the waiver for the outside storage or turning it into a used car lot. I think looking at the urban renewal plan for the future, we want to have a different type of mix of businesses, and as I probably believe, this will continue as a auto repair store, but I don't think it's consistent with the future plans for Douglas Avenue corridor to have this expanded, and the code says a half-acre lot minimum. I think you should stick to that, and so I would support the waiver requirement for electrical and telephone underground equipment, but not the waiver for the used car lot. I think with opposition of the neighbors, especially the Lower Beaver Association, I think it's important we move ahead and try to upgrade all communities with tangible results.
If we were to actually deny A, would B then be moot because you aren't changing class anyway?
They could still act on the site plan. There might be some improvements on there that they would want to execute. We'd have to go back and look. But I do think they have standing with their current site plan. You know, they could elect to just operate it as they have been. We would need to go look and see, you know, what's the site plan on the books, what does it have, but I don't think there's any harm in approving the site plan and the utility waiver and then giving them the ability, if they want to do some of these site improvements that they're showing. There's some fencing, there's the bike rack. There's no harm in letting them just finish the process. They certainly could withdraw it all if they wanted to.
Then I will kick my horse and recommend deferral for 3 years of the waiver instead of a waiver, so we don't actually leave another waiver in place and thereby further diminish the code.
wait, so could I please understand, so they were operating as an auto repair shop. They've made all these improvements because they want to sell a couple of cars, correct? Or they didn't have to do any of these repairs, right? But they decided that they wanted to sell a couple of cars, parking 3 cars in front.
Right.
So they've done all these repairs, which I've driven Douglas, and all those trees are such a great benefit.
Yeah.
So,
I don't know, I can't speak for the applicant on any work that they've already gone ahead and done. I
Okay.
mean, obviously, there's a bike rack there.
but they've planted trees and stuff, and they've kind of moved forward or not?
Well, I don't know if the trees that are there today were part of a previous site plan.
Okay, thank you.
So that might be,
Okay.
Any other comments?
Well, I move that we approve on 6 waiver for item B and delete the waiver for item A.
Well, I'd obviously ask for a friendly amendment to defer versus waive, but it's up to you.
excuse me, I'll be consistent with the prior decision of the board, so therefore I will politely reject your friendly amendment.
Okay, any discussion of the motion?
I just have one question. If we do this, we're also approving the proposed public hearing site plan. Does that mean, I guess to, maybe go along what Carolyn was saying, does that include the site improvements or not?
Yes, he would be able to act on the site improvements. So I think that's why it's fine to go ahead and approve it. If they want to make those changes, the site plan would be there, be approved, but they couldn't do the display with the motion as it is.
Any further discussion, questions?
So why would they want to make those improvements?
Well, I don't know that they will.
Yeah, I'm just like, I don't understand.
But I don't see any reason, it would be punitive, I think, just to deny their site plan. I mean.
You do feel it would be punitive?
I think so. I mean,
I think so too.
They've.
That's what I just wanted to clarify,
Yep.
get it straight. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further discussion, there's a motion on the floor. All those in favor, raise your right hand. All those opposed, raise your right hand. And Greg, what's your vote?
No.
No. Okay. What was the? 9-4, the motion passes then.
I'm sorry, what was the vote again?
9-4, correct? Yes, 9-4, Greg.
Thank you.
Okay, we're ready for item. Great. Item number 7 is a request from 1925 High Street for review and approval of public hearing site plan Des Moines Ballroom for property located 1925 High Street for a Tech 2 design alternative and to allow waiver of requirement for placement of all electrical, telephone, and cable transmission systems underground. And we have Jillian Summers, who's new to presenting before us, so welcome.
Thank you for having me. Jillian Summer, city staff, planning staff. The item number 7 is a site plan that is requesting waiver of undergrounding of utilities. The subject property is 1925 High Street, located to the east of MLK, north of Ingersoll, at the southern end of Sherman Hill. The building was previously an office building. It's being converted into a dance studio, so the reason for the site plan is a change of use. And as part of that site plan, existing overhead utilities are required to be underground where reasonably practical. There are 3 kind of pieces to the undergrounding on this property. There's an existing pole at the northeast corner of the property, and to the north and extending down the alley, there are main lines that are outside of the scope of this project, but this pole acts as the guide pole for those lines, and so Mid-American has indicated that the pole would need to remain at this point to support those main lines and the guide wires related to them. The second piece of the undergrounding is the service line to the building. It's existing overhead. And in order to bring it underground, it would require work by Mid-American as well as a private electrician. Mid-American has provided an estimated cost for their work at $20,000. And the Baker Group has provided an estimate quote for their portion of the work at $46,644. The third piece to the undergrounding is the primary lines that extend from the pole at the northeast corner down to the street lights along High Street. There is a line that extends to a street light that's just to the south of Gateway Market, and then there are lines along High Street as well. There is one street light in front of the 1925 High property. The Sherman Hill Schmid, the original Schmid area has historic style fixtures, and they expanded the Schmid boundary a few years ago, and would like the historic fixtures to be expanded into this expanded boundary as well. The intention would be that the Schmid would actually do that work of undergrounding the lines and upgrading the streetlights to a historic fixture. So consistent with what we have done on other projects, instead of actually requiring the applicant to underground these lines along High and upgrading the street light, we would be asking for an escrow towards that work. The estimated cost from Mid-American for that work, including the cost of one street light based on a black metal pole and LED fixture, would be $12,000. So that would be the escrow amount that we would be wanting for that work. The cost of the other work for the service line, the $66,000 would be 32% of the project cost. The project is about $200,000, and so the staff recommendation would be that for the service line to the building, we would be in support of waiving that. The again, the main lines to the north, we would not want that underground either, and we would support waiving any of that work as well. But the work for the historic streetlights and the undergrounding of those lines, we would be asking for an escrow agreement in the amount of $12,000.
Any questions, commissioners?
Jillian, did you have anything else beyond the slide to?
I guess just to show the site plan. It's up here.
Madam Chair, I have a question.
Go ahead, Greg.
Unless you show the slide that I can't see, the staff recommendation that I'm reading on in the packet that went out just says additional information from the dam, blah, blah, blah. And all the information you just gave is not in the recommendation about escrowing money and doing all that. Is that something that can get into a formal recommendation, everything you just said?
Yeah, and we issued that today. Did we get that emailed out?
Yeah.
Okay, so it was late in the day, and I apologize.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay.
You're right, I did see that. Okay.
Yeah, so we,
Sorry.
yep, no worries. Hey, technical challenge of calling in, so. And I do want to, while I'm talking, I just want to, just for those that are newer to the commission that maybe haven't seen this, so, just to clarify, what we're asking of the applicant, which is just like what we've asked of other applicants within the Sherman Hill area, they're not being asked to pay for the upgraded light fixture. They're just being asked to escrow the money that any commercial site plan would be required to do in the downtown area. And that is to go to the black archetype fixture. And that's why, and the Schmid would cover the difference from that point up to the historic style fixture that you see in the kind of core part of Sherman Hill.
So Jason, I know that a couple years ago there was a similar deal that was accepted for the Lua Brewing Company there on High Street. Do you know, was that looked up, and is this consistent with how that was calculated and how that was escrowed? Because I also believe there was a timeline on it that if Sherman Hill didn't get it done, that owner got their money back. In other words, there was pressure on Sherman Hill, you need to get this done. And I remember meetings with Mike Ludwig and some others trying to convince Sherman Hill to get the engineering done and start spending their Schmid money, because they have money saved. I just want to make sure it's an equitable sort of approach along High Street, because as you know, there's going to be more and more projects coming in, and there has been past ones.
Jillian, do you recall the specific time frame in that agreement? We're looking to apply the same standard. I just don't remember the date.
I believe the standard escrow time was for 10 years. Does that sound right?
I thought it was shorter, but whatever it is, my request to you would be to get that. Let me read your thing here again. I don't know that I see a timeline in your recommendation. I don't see that. I would need to be part of it.
The updated staff, I apologize, we didn't get that in there. I think Bert is maybe digging through a record here.
I can hear him. He's moving a bunch of papers. I can hear him. So I guess that's my point in that is, and there needs to be some pressure put on Sherman Hill to get this done, or it's never going to get done. I don't know how to do that.
Well, if we're not able in our quick research here to find whatever the specific time frame was in that one, I think we would just make a motion that it matches consistent with other similar agreements.
I would love to piggyback on Greg's point, because as someone who used to be in Sherman Hill, this is exactly the exact same logic, which was consistent with item 5 that we passed last week, inconsistent with the 2 today, also consistent with the logic from 4 weeks ago on the sidewalk issue, which is that we are not requiring them to put in the high-cost light fixture. We're saying, hey, you know what? You get to put in the same cost thing that would be going in anyway, and if we have a certain amount of time and the group responsible for it doesn't put stuff together, money goes back. But you don't have to put in more money than we'd pay otherwise. Very similarly, I would argue exactly equivalently, if we know that a whole block will go in over a certain amount of time, and we say, hey, it's going to cost you 10% of this cost because that transformer is going to be replaced anyway, let's put the whole block in. Again, for CenturyLink, you're talking about at least 25 plus houses have to go in before they can make money. Otherwise, we're always waiving. If we say, this is the amount that would cost you if you all went in bulk, you have 10 years, maybe City of Des Moines, to go do this whole block. If we do it within 10 years, i.e. the pressure that we need to make sure these things get moving, you get the money and reduce this cost of this project. If we don't do it, you get your money back, no big deal, you're effectively waived anyway. That seems to be exactly the same as these historic lights, just bigger amounts of money, which makes it more important because it is bigger amounts of money. Either the city pays more later, and these people don't pay a fair share, or these people pay way more now, or we are ruining the actual access to this code to be able to be enforceable. Because again, we have a logic that says we're going to waive some, not waive others, we get an equitable outcome. This example is a perfect example of exactly why I will beat my dead horse again, that in 57 days, we will get access to better recommendations that I hope will look a lot like what Sherman Hill has done. And for that, we should give staff time to come back with a suggestion that looks hopefully a lot like what Sherman Hill does, or something better because it's been fully researched. And for that purpose, defer versus waive the undergrounding requirement again.
Any other questions for staff?
The only thing I'd add is it was a 10-year time frame for Lua.
Thank you.
Is the applicant present to speak this evening? Please come forward, state your name and address, and you have 10 minutes.
Hey there, Tyler Strube at 3315 Terrace Drive in Des Moines. My wife and I, Talis, own 1925 High LLC. As you can see on the site plan, we are committed to improving this site. We're going to spend about $7,600 on improved landscaping, $10,000 on improved ADA parking. We've already spent, and many of you have driven by, if you visit Gateway, we've repainted the whole building, power washed the CMU that was peeling, and the masonry out front to the tune of $7,000. So again, we are totally on board and committed to improving the site. We are also on board with getting a historic pole out here. I think where we disagree with the staff recommendation is the vehicle in which it gets paid for. Chris, I mean, I think you mentioned fair share. We have, I guess, the burden of having the pole on our property. So this pole is a community asset, and I think that's one of the reasons that the Schmid got set up in the first place back in 1998. It actually says that we're to pay $1.50 per $1,000 of assessed property value, which we pay. So our value as a commercial property is a lot higher than these residences. Therefore, we pay our fair share and pay a lot more money, to the tune right now of about $1,000 a year with how our property is currently valued. It also says specifically that the funds have been dedicated for the installation, maintenance, and utility usage of historic street lighting. I confirmed with Ryan Howell, who is the president of the district today, that the improvements of the street lighting, the historic street lighting, includes underground. So what we're asking for, if the Schmid does have the dollars, to go ahead and use the dollars as they're intended as a communal resource, improvement with these streetlights. It shouldn't be put on the burden of, one business just because they have a street light, on their property, that they're to front the whole bill of $12,000. So our position is that we use the Schmid dollars that we are currently paying into for the intended use and the scope of what the Schmid was set up for originally. Are there any questions?
No questions? Then thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anyone else present who wishes to speak in support of the applicant? Anyone present who wishes to speak in opposition? Okay, any more questions for staff before we close the public hearing? Okay, we'll now close the public hearing and have commissioners. What are your thoughts?
Madam Chair, this is Greg. What the applicant said is actually what I remember too, when we were doing the project a few years ago, that the intent was that the SMID money would be used for not only buying the fixtures, but also undergrounding. So that's why, Chris, I think this is a different conversation on this one. I don't disagree with your concern about the broad topic. I totally agree with that. But this is unique in that there is a mechanism. How someone convinces Sherman Hill to spend that SMID money and get it done, I don't know. That's a different issue also. What I would be in support of, and I don't know what the board thinks, but I would be in support of not requiring them to underground. I don't fully understand whether or not they should be required to escrow that large amount of money if the SMID has money. I think I remember that the Lua project did not put that kind of money down. I know they did escrow some money. However, they were required to replace the power that goes to the building from the pole and underground that portion. And that seems like a reasonable request that owners should do along High Street.
Thank you, Greg. Any other comments, discussion?
Greg, I have a question for Greg. Have you read the revised staff report as far as this is concerned, the details of that? Can you hear me, Greg?
I have. Yes, I'm sorry. I have read it. I'm looking at it again.
Well, take your time.
I'm not sure I understand the 32% of the total project cost. Can someone equate that to $1? I don't know where that number came from. Is that some consistent number we use in other projects or something? I don't know.
No, the estimated cost for the work not including what we're recommending, but just the part of the back that included the service line and the pole. We had to underground that pole in the northwest corner of the site is going to be $24,000. And doing so would then trigger upgrades to the building for their electrical meters and panels, which would be another $46,000, almost $47,000. That's where we got the 32% for that utility work in the back. I don't know, Jillian, did I cover that? Is that correct? Okay. Steve's nodding yes, I said it correctly. So there's really two issues. There's the pole at the back, and which provides the power to the building and is also intertwined with other poles in the area. And then there's the street light poles that also have lines on them in the right of way along High Street. That's where we're asking for the escrow. It's on the High Street side, and recommending a waiver of the back side. Do you remember how much, you mentioned Lua did their service line? Was it, of course, they were, that was a pretty extensive project. I don't know if you might recall what impacts that might have.
I do not remember. I don't remember the dollars. I know that their power had been fed from a pole on the back behind Jack's old project there. So it wasn't a large distance, but they had to bring it down the pole underground and into the building, and left the transformer on the pole, but were able to remove the overhead. And that seems like a reasonable request to me.
We've done a little more homework, and it does look like the escrow for Lua.
Yeah, I did find the escrow that was approved by council in June 24 of 2019 for Lua, and it was, as Jason mentioned, for 10 years. So if Sherman Hill didn't do it within 10 years, they got their money back. And the escrow is for $7,705. So our current estimate of $12,000 though was based on an estimate we got from our engineering department, right? I believe the $12,000 is in today's cost.
But staff is requesting $12,000 and 32% of the project costs for the work. Sorry, I'm still trying to understand that.
No, the 32%, that's all specific to the work that would that we're proposing be waived, that we would recommend waiver. That's the pole at the back of the property and the transformers back there, and then the service line to the building. That altogether is about 32, it's the equivalent of 32% of their project budget in and of itself. That 32% does not include the 12,000 escrow. That's pulled out as its own thing.
So basically, the amount remaining is roughly $90,500. So the total project budget's basically 300. Is that what we're talking about? How'd we get to 32?
220.
So it's 220, and we have 90 remaining, getting us to 32?
Yeah, I mean, that's my understanding. I would need to look at the math here.
It sounds closer to 40-something, but...
And we use a permit value, so I don't know if that might give us a different basis.
The 32% is the Mid-American's cost of $24,000 plus Baker Group's cost of $46,644 divided by $220,000.
What was the applicant's position on this, please?
The applicant is requesting waiver of everything.
Everything, yeah. So Jason, could you help me understand if if we, as a board, approve the first recommendation, the escrow for $12,000, why would that be needed if the SMID is in place to pay for all undergrounding and bearing or removal of poles? Why would you need that $12,000?
But my understanding, I mean, this has come from several projects. It wasn't just Lua, it was also the cathedral or cathedral. I'm not sure exactly the name at the moment, but and then there was also site plan for the apartment building at the corner of over there by the coffee shop to the south, and then we've also had Hoyt Sherman, where we and there I think we did a security bond. I think we took a slightly different approach. I wasn't involved with that one, but if you take the project and you forget that you're in Sherman Hill, the development is obligated to meet the requirement. There'd been past interest on those other projects for people to provide the black archetype type fixture to do undergrounding in the downtown area. But it doesn't make sense to have the property owner move forward with that and then put in black archetype light fixtures that you down the road want to replace with the historic light fixture. Sitting here, I do not know the balance of the Schmid. I think from our perspective, we've looked at it as, development is required, has obligations. This is a development obligation, but in this particular case, it makes sense to wait because we know there might be this other project that would undo the work that they're doing. So that's the perspective that we've taken.
So if I understand your answer right, $12,000 would be to, in the future, purchase a black archetype pole if for some reason the SMID won't put their pole in that you guys approved.
Yeah, the $12,000 represents what it would take to put in to underground the utilities and do the black archetype pole that you see throughout downtown Mount Ingersoll.
Anyone wish to make a motion at this point, or have any further discussion?
Well, okay, so are you saying waiving this would be inconsistent with what we've done with other businesses?
Yeah,
Like Lua?
It'd be inconsistent with what we've done with Lua, the cathedral, and then the new apartment building that's being constructed by Smoky Row.
But if we were 2 blocks to the south, granting this would be inconsistent with like every other waiver we've been giving. I mean, half of our agenda tonight has been waiving an ordinance that over years we decided was a good idea. And now we're saying, well, because the Schmid will supposedly pay the top amount for like a premium light, we're going to make them put in a certain amount for the light. I'm not saying it's not a bad idea. And Greg, I understand the subtle difference in this case. The concept I like, but it does seem inconsistent here that we would say, all right, we're going to help Sherman Hill Schmidt here instead of just waiving it.
I personally don't think it's inconsistent because the property owners have paid money to the SMID, or are still paying it, I guess. I mean, there's a SMID levy, right? So they're paying money. To have them pay again, to me, is a very different equation than 2 blocks to the south. Because 2 blocks to the south, they're not paying money up front into a SMID. So to me, they're very different. I think the crux of the problem here, and we ran into this a few years ago, is I believe all these homeowners, or I'm sorry, I keep saying that, these property owners need to put the proper pressure on Sherman Hill's board to start spending their SMID money, get this work done. And they just drag their feet, and I don't know why.
Did we have...
I've lost myself.
I want to just add a comment as well,
So now-
as far as the consistency goes, while you're figuring out something over there. I'm all about consistency, Chris. If not, you can ask fellow commissioners about sidewalks. But the previous two cases that we've seen tonight, if you look at the assessed value of the building, it's very comparable to the cost to underground the utilities. So what I'm trying to say here is every case is very different, so trying to apply something across the board is not going to work out in every situation. So I do understand where you're coming from, and I'm looking forward to 60, 57 days, whatever it may be, when we have some potential solutions in front of us. In the case in front of us right now, clearly there's the Sherman Hill Schmidt that takes care of this, where it's different from the city that we don't have somebody to take care of those escrow agreements. And the pole behind the building serves as a transformer for multiple utilities, for multiple buildings, for multiple properties. So that's where this becomes an issue as far as the consistency goes, in my opinion. In this case, we do have a mechanism to hold the applicant or whoever it is in the neighborhood that's developing a project to put money down for the escrow. We've done that in the past. We just talked about Lua. So at this point, I'm going to move staff as is and see where that goes.
No further discussion now. There's a motion on the floor.
Yeah, I think even though we didn't have the comment, I don't know if you might want to.
Well, if you'd like to come forward as the applicant and after all the discussion and make some, address some of the concerns.
Thank you, Dory. Greg, I think you and I are on the exact same page, and where I'm coming from here is that if we pay the $12,000 in escrow, we are also paying the $1.50 per thousand assessed, which on our current property value equates to $945 per year. So we are paying it, if this thing doesn't go forward for 10 years, we're effectively paying for it twice, and I'm still getting the same pole. And that's really the big crux of our issue. The other thing that I wanted to point out is it's the city that collects our taxes. So when I hear all this, the Sherman Hill Schmidt needs to, go forward with the project, I think really you guys are the ones that pull the strings. It's not the individual property owners, because I can assure you that there's a lot of folks throughout the city and in Sherman Hill specifically that want to see these poles go through. So I would just maybe put the onus back on the city if you're the one that controls the purse strings. That's really all I said. But Greg, I just echo your comments that it really feels like the city is double dipping here, and we're the one that's left holding the bag. Thanks.
Okay. Chris, is there a number that you would be more comfortable with, sir, for escrow? Or nothing at all?
The fact that we've already, like I mentioned, put $7,000 into repainting the building, $7,600 into landscaping, $10,000 into ADA. I feel like we've gone already above and beyond what, might have been required or what is required. If it's a take it or leave it offer, I think I'd be willing to negotiate, but I'd rather not make that negotiation in this format. If there's one individual I can negotiate with, we could take this offline and I can negotiate with a staff member.
This is the one thing that I apologize for not being clear. I aggressively agree with Greg and you in this case that I don't think us saying, hey, we're going to either escrow for this, it goes into Sherman Hill Schmidt that we're already paying into for something that is a significant, this is a significant node in that neighborhood, right? Either, in my opinion, again, dead horse, we only got 57 days. It's just like Christmas almost, right? So in 57 days, we'll get an awesome present which shows, okay, let's defer this. Let's figure out what our plan is. Let's make sure it's going to be equitable. And so, but I don't think we should be doing half an escrow and then the other half waiving. We should treat these together like we would anywhere else, because in this case, it's even more crazy. Sherman Hill should be collecting the money on these things. Let's use that money wisely before we ask someone else to pay up the difference for the Schmidt.
Madam Chair, may I suggest something, and you can throw it away and that'll be fine. When the packet that we originally got had a staff recommendation, and now at 4:30 today or thereabouts, we have a big change to the recommendation because there was new information from a Mid-American. So my question is, it's very complex. And I wonder if it would be, since it got off on sort of the right foot or the wrong foot, and it is complex, if it might be an idea to continue this to another meeting when we could have a chance to think about it more clearly.
How does that impact the applicant? Are there things that are relevant here? I mean,
Well, there's a motion on the floor, folks.
So we submitted for a building permit back in August of this year. We have building department and fire sign off. The only thing that we're waiting on is P&Z. So it's held us up for about 45 days, which has caused us to extend our lease at our current space over 221 East Locust, right next to Fleet Feet. Our rent there is about $5,000 a month. So just because of some delay, it's already costing us dollars. So that's how it affects us. Thanks, Chris.
So
and we're gonna get into winter here. We're gonna have further effect. This is gonna get cold. I think we should defer these requirements.
Do I need
Madam
to,
Chair, this is Greg. Do
remove
we
my
have a motion on the floor?
Yes, we do. A motion is to approve staff.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yeah, you're
Yes.
right.
And if anybody would like to offer a friendly amendment to that, we could do that, such as allowing them to negotiate with city staff on the dollar amount.
I have trouble with that being fair. I guess my friendly motion would be that we defer these requirements for 3 years while we have the 57 days. That allows us to continue forward. This allows us to get a smarter way to look at this and, figure out how the Schmidt piece plays in. I mean, to ask for money here that we may say, well, we're just leaving 12,000 in the bank here for something we don't know. We have an undergrounding. If we say, okay, we're going to waive the undergrounding, now we actually give ourselves issues in the future. I guess again, it's 57 days. We're supposed to get a better plan. We're not going to be in a worse position, but if we keep delaying, they're going to miss winter. They're going to miss their building. We're going to be charging them $5,000 a month more for a public benefit.
I do want to clarify that we are working towards presenting some options to the city council at a workshop. And then following that, depending on the direction we get, we'd be going through the process of code development. There hasn't been a promise to have like a adoptable code that fixes this in 57 days. Just want to make sure everybody understands that.
But we will have, in 57 days, options for a plan to move forward, which is better than we are now, which is appearing to make arbitrary decisions, which is problematic.
John,
it sounds like we're not on the same page, so I'm going to withdraw my motion, and we can continue this discussion if there's a consensus to push this, or if we want to decide that tonight. I think there's a lot of things that have been left unsaid. So let's.
I would move that we defer the requirements for 3 years for both of these undergroundings, which will give us the time to figure out a smarter, more equitable plan to do this. So my recommendation is, sorry, I don't have it in front of me. Basically, instead of waive, defer for 3 years, but also not require the $12,000 escrow. So all the undergrounding is deferred for 3 years. The 12,000 is out. There's no, we're not requiring any undergrounding now. We're deferring that requirement, the 134.12E, I think.
And this keeps the project moving, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, otherwise, we're charging them more and more money per month on a project that's a good project that we want, while we're trying to figure out a better way to do it, and we'll have recommendations in 57 days.
The risk to them is that in 3 years, they'll either need to comply, or they'll have to come back and ask for it to be waived again. There's certainly a lot of, I don't know that any solution that we come up with is going to, their situation is so unique in that there's a Schmid, there's a streetlight project. I don't know that anything that we're going to come up with is going to be a benefit to them. But I guess that would be an opportunity to see where we are in 3 years. I couldn't tell you about where the Schmidt is and the project timeline for that. But I just want to make sure that we understand that, yes, we can defer it. It has no cost impacts to the applicant now. They can go ahead and proceed with operating their business, but there is some risk. I just want to make sure the commission understands that there is some level of risk associated with that.
Yeah, and the downside is getting larger, will get larger, which means we need to be focused within 3 years to find a good plan. But in the end of the day, if we get to 3 years and we're like, man, this is way too expensive, we're waiving it all, we're in the same place, but we've at least been informed and not actually made any adjustments that negatively impact our code in that period of time, which is what we are doing every time we waive. Because now someone says, all right, now we've got precedence, we're not going to underground. And now we're going to have the same issue. We still have overhead lines that still come down in storms, that still require maintenance to our trees, which still prevent us from actually getting where we think the DSM plan wants us to go. But we shouldn't be penalizing them for us not having a better plan. So my motion again was all utilities waived for 3 years. I'm sorry, deferred for 3 years versus waived. So not waived, everything, we aren't breaking them apart, everything deferred for 3 years.
And no,
Chris, I'd like to offer, Madam Chair, a friendly amendment to Chris.
okay.
My friendly amendment offer would be that on the second paragraph that talks about the bringing the utilities from the pole to the building, that the applicant be required to underground that portion. I think that's consistent with what we've done in the past. And whether the street stuff, how it gets resolved or not, I believe that would always be a property owner responsibility to get it to their building.
Do we have some idea of the cost of doing that? That portion?
But Jillian, do you have is it the, it wouldn't be those two, it would just be the 46,000 is the upgrade the panel and the meters and just the service line, is that correct? In the staff report?
It would be the 46,000 plus 24,000. It takes both the Mid-American piece and Baker Group to do that.
But the 24 is I think what Greg is saying is just have the service line, leave that pole and transformer up, but have the service line run down and enter the building.
Correct.
So I don't know that.
That's my suggested friendly amendment to Chris.
I believe
Leave the
Mid-American
pole,
gave us,
bring it down the pole and underground.
I believe Mid-American gave us cost for that option. It still takes them doing something, and I believe it was 10,000 for that option.
10,000 instead of the 24 or 10?
Instead of 24.
Okay, so we're talking about
Well, I'm sorry, plus the gross up, so 12,000.
12,000 plus the 46.
Yes.
Okay. So 58.
I apologize. I mean, I've read this thing backwards and forwards like 3 times a day, and I guess I'm not familiar enough with these numbers, and it doesn't seem like we have enough numbers here to I guess, in this case, I'm not, since we don't know the cost, if I'm reading this correctly, we aren't changing the big cost. I would rather deny the friendly amendment in this case out of a lack of knowledge of what the impacts are. So I would still stay with the defer for 3 years for all these pieces.
Okay, motion on the floor? Oh, go ahead.
May I, before we have a vote, may I ask the applicant a question?
Go ahead, yeah.
I thought the public was closed.
I'm asking for it to be reopened so I can ask a question. If you don't touch the service to the building, are you upgrading the service to the building to run your building in their operation?
No, we
Are you
actually
upgrading
require
it?
less amperage for our current use.
Okay, thank you.
Yep. Thank you.
Okay, so there is a motion on the floor to defer all undergrounding for 3 years and with no escrow requirement. And
Correct.
And the friendly amendment, Greg, was not accepted.
Okay.
Okay, so all those in favor of this motion, raise your right hand. And all those opposed, raise your right hand. And Greg, what is your vote?
No.
No? Okay. So the motion passes 11-2. Okay, we have one item left on the agenda this evening. Item number 8 is a request from 6450 LLC for review and approval of public hearing site plan Delaware Avenue outdoor storage improvements for property located at the vicinity of 3921 Delaware Avenue for the following Type 2 design alternatives. A, further consideration of the following Type 1 design alternative requests related to landscaping and screening of 2 outdoor storage areas associated with industrial uses on the site. And should I read through all of these at this point, or? Okay, and then item B is waiver of the requirement for placement of all electrical, telephone, and cable transmission systems underground.
Right. Madam Chair, members of the Commission, Burt Drost, planning staff for the City of Des Moines. The item before you is a public hearing site plan that would allow for expansion of outdoor storage related to an existing business on the city's northeast side. The subject property is currently occupied by a King's Throne porta potty business. They are wanting to expand the use to include 2 large outdoor storage areas. So this map on your screens right now is the subject property. You can see that they had this existing long skinny property, and they're now purchasing a portion of the parcel to the south that they would be incorporating with their site. I'm going to show you the site plan here, which Jacob Coupe in our office had done the site plan review for this, and he provided a color-coded area that I'll be showing you shortly that will help hopefully make it a little easier to understand what's going on. But they essentially have 2 outdoor areas here, one in front of the building, so between the building and Delaware Avenue, and then a second larger one to the east of the building. And if I didn't mention it, the freeway is immediately to the east of the property. So I'll have a photo here shortly that shows the view from the freeway. And this is their landscaping plan. You can see they're proposing some landscaping along the south boundary here. So as the chair mentioned, there's 2 groups of Type 2 and Type 1 design alternatives being requested. The second one is the undergrounding of overhead utilities. There are 3 poles along Delaware Avenue. I will get to the estimate shortly, but I do know that they are a significant cost compared to the overall cost of the project. So staff has recommended approval of that waiver. And then the other series of appeals, which were Type 1 design alternatives that had been denied administratively. So this review tonight by the Commission is really further consideration of those denied Type 1s. And there are 4 of those, all relating to landscaping around the perimeter of the site plan. So as I mentioned, here's that color-coded picture that one of our staff members made that shows the 2 outdoor storage areas. The site, or the Type 1 design alternatives being requested, the first would be to allow this storage area here to be surrounded by chain link fence that would have slats in it. Our code does not allow for chain link fence in between a building and a front property line. So they're needing a design alternative in order to use chain link fence here, and staff is not supportive of that design alternative. The other design alternatives have to do with the screening along this easternmost storage area. They're wanting to use existing landscaping and then also use, I believe, chain link fence again with slats to provide the screening for this easternmost area. Here's a photo taken from the center of the site. And this is looking straight east down the site towards the existing building. So one of the outdoor storage areas would be located in that general vicinity. The next photo is taken from Delaware, I believe it's from Delaware Avenue. Again, the site is set quite a ways back from Delaware. And then this last photo is taken from the freeway. So this is what people see when they come to, or coming into Des Moines from the north. So the subject property is back here. So it's not this Immaculatich property, but it's this property here. And they are providing or proposing some landscaping here that would hopefully screen some of these porta potties from view. So as far as the staff recommendation goes, like I mentioned, there's 4 waivers requested for the landscaping. The first is a waiver to allow them to use the 6-foot tall chain link fence with slats. The second is a waiver to allow, or a waiver of the requirement for a 6-foot fence with a minimum 80% opacity along the eastern, northern, and southern portions of that storage area that's to the east of the building. The third is a waiver of the landscaping requirements, so like the planting requirements along the southern boundary of that outdoor storage area. And then the fourth is to allow utilization of existing landscaping along the western edge of that area to the east of the building. I don't believe we received any public comment on this one. We didn't. So as far as our staff recommendation goes, as I mentioned, we have recommended approval of the of the waiver to bury utilities. And hopefully make sense here when I read through the rest of our recommendation. But with any public hearing site plan, one of the actions the commission has to take is approval of the public hearing site plan. So we have recommended approval of the public hearing site plan subject to these 4 conditions. I'm not going to read through them all, but one of them is a condition here that says provision of a note that states no dumping and or cleaning of any portable restrooms shall occur on site. This one goes without saying since the property is owned I-1 light industrial. That's not allowed on this property. They'd first need to rezone to I-2 heavy industrial and then get a conditional use from the Board of Adjustment. But we just wanted to have that be clear on the site plan that they're not allowed to dump or clean the porta potties on the property. So as far as the type 2 design, or this really should say type 1 design alternatives. As far as those 4 type 1 design alternatives for the landscaping go, staff is recommending approval of the one to use the existing landscaping along the southwest and east sides of that storage area behind the building, and we're recommending waiver of the underground utilities. Then staff is also recommending approval of the following design alternatives subject to the following. Use of the existing landscaping along the south portion of the western storage area. But we have a caveat that they have to provide an additional tree to ensure that the minimum 1 tree per 40 lineal foot requirement is met. And we've also recommended approval to allow them to utilize the existing fencing along the north edge of the eastern storage area, provided that the 80% opacity requirement is met. We've also recommended utilization of existing fences along all sides of that eastern storage area. I don't know if I need to read all of that, but we said so long as a secondary barrier is provided. Uh-oh. Is that a sign?
Yeah. It's just use the buttons there. There you go. Thanks, Bert. Just to help move along, on C, they were wanting to use the existing fencing. We were saying for that eastern storage area, we thought that's fine, but it's not at the storage area boundary. It's further away, so we thought there should be something like a chain and baller to ensure that they're not starting to encroach in the landscaped areas. And then on to D.
All right, and then lastly, we have recommended denial of that request to use the chain link fence around the storage area to the west of the building. So I know it's kind of complicated, so let me know if you have any questions.
I have a question, Bert, please. I think the applicant is the same one that has a similar facility on New York Avenue or 6th Avenue. Is that correct?
That is the same business. They were, on that site, they were attempting to rezone it to an I-2 to allow for the cleaning to occur there, and I think they ultimately withdrew the request for rezoning. But you're right, that is the same, a King's Throne company.
So the present zoning allows for the storage of those on the facility grounds, is that correct?
That's correct. Both sites, this site before you tonight and that other site on 505 Sheridan Avenue, those were both zoned I-1 light industrial, so it's the exact same zoning.
Do you have a picture of the utilities?
I don't believe it was a good picture if it's there. Yeah. You can see, I believe there's 3 poles with wires running between them. Probably a better view here. Any other questions?
Is any of this will be visible from I-35?
Yeah, so this is the view from Interstate 235. So they are proposing some plantings in this area here.
And could you outline those more specifically for me, please?
Okay. So you can see these darker boxes here. I believe those are actually some of the porta potties that are on the property. So there's this green strip here. That's really the buffer between Mackinac to the north and then the subject property to the south.
And help me out once more. Trees along the property line on the east or no?
Yeah, there's significant vegetation along I-235 there.
Yeah, we were comfortable with them utilizing that existing vegetation both on it. There's also a grade differential once you get down straight on with their site. I think we had a note in there that they have to maintain any landscaping they're using for buffering. So, should there be a large storm or something that would wipe out some of those trees that are existing, they would need to replace them if you adopted the staff recommendation.
Thank you.
Any other questions for staff? If not at this time, I guess we could hear from the applicant.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, members of the commission, Eric Cannon, 2727 Southwest Snyder Boulevard. Appreciate your guys' time tonight. A couple things I wanted to walk through here. We're in agreement with the majority of the staff comments. There are a couple that we have some, I guess, dialogue we would anticipate discussion on. The first being, I'd be happy to answer the questions you guys have as well, but the first being this front outdoor storage area here. As you can see, it is this location here. Oh, probably can't see. Is this location here. This location is in excess of about 460 feet off of Delaware. There's an entire warehouse building that sits here, all the way up to the frontage along Delaware. So this fenced area does not only sit down, but a well distance away. We don't have any problem with providing the fully opaque cedar fence along the portion that fronts Delaware, because that's what's visible. The question and the concern we have is when we're asked to provide it on these three sides. The southern side would be, I guess, screening against the precast building wall. There's an existing chain link fence here with slats already. So it just seems very excessive to provide additional fully opaque fencing in that location. This is property owned by this property owner. This property to the south is a separate property owner. But this is also just vegetation in there on the other side of the chain link fence. Same thing, fully opaque screen. We would be screening against the building that they own. Seems excessive from a request standpoint. Now in the north, we have an existing chain link fence here against Mackinac. I think you guys all saw the photos of the Mackinac yard, its equipment, its trailers, its overhead doors, precast building. They're a heavy highway contractor. So I guess all those things are a little bit confusing when the request comes in. Again, the portion that fronts Delaware, we fully understand the visual screen from the public right-of-way, but would request that only the fully opaque requirement be on the west side of the fence there. The other concern question we have is the item for the secondary mitigation requirements. As you can see, this very heavy screen of trees up against 235. Every single one of these bold dash lines is a contour, 25 plus feet of grade change in here. So we've identified more or less this entire open space to be the storage yard. Their intent is to use that space to the limits that are available. The secondary requirement doesn't make a lot of sense to us. They're going to expand this yard. Kind of the limits we're showing, the rest of it is dense trees and a slope that goes straight up to the interstate. The expense to put a fence or a bollard system in here to limit that doesn't make a lot of sense. You can't see this area from anywhere. You're going to stop yourself from going up a slope. I mean, the natural barrier that exists there is really going to mitigate any expansion that they could do. So it doesn't make a lot of sense to put a fence all along here. There is a fence all along the DOT right-of-way in this location, but obviously that slope and dense stand of trees. They are recommending slats get installed in this fence that's in the middle of the woods here. Again, very confusing to us why we would need slats and a chain link fence in the middle of that dense stand of trees. Also, the barrier, the secondary barrier that's being requested here, you can see this is about an 11-foot embankment that goes straight up the hill. This natural grade is going to stop them from expanding that. They're not going to try and store stuff on the side of the hill, so to me it's very confusing. Okay. The west side as well has a very similar condition. You can move it over here. Okay. Thanks, Bert. Yeah. Sorry, I'm always accused of talking loud, and I assume everybody can hear me. The west side here, very similar condition. We have a detention basin that we're excavating in this location. Has a slope that goes down into the basin. That natural grade there is going to limit anything from expanding. They're not going to want to have their equipment fall into the basin or get flooded or anything like that. So the natural barriers that exist on both the east and south side are very practical for the need to limit this area. The basin that's going to be built on the west side, again, acts as a barrier that will limit this area. They are asking for slats to be provided on this north side here. As Bert showed, we will have a landscaping buffer that needs to go in there adjacent to Mackinac. I think even the photos that were shown from 235, it's still hard to see what's even in there today because of some of the trees, but we will enhance that with the additional landscaping. They are okay with adding slats in the fence in this location. We respect that there's probably not enough there from a natural barrier standpoint. So the slats in that location we're totally comfortable with. Again, the secondary or barrier, a fence that's right next to landscaping, that's right next to a fence with slats, seems a bit excessive. The landscaping that's going to be in there will limit them. That has to go in before they can get a CO, that would be inspected. They literally have to tear it all out to be able to expand their yard. So I guess we're really struggling with this additional fence or barrier that's being requested to be added to kind of control the limits of the yard. There's no setback issues, there's none of those limitations. It just seems excessive. I think that is all of the items that we had questions on tonight. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. Thank you very much.
Any questions?
Just to clarify, so you agree with which ones do you not, which ones are you not?
I had you didn't want to do the bollards for the eastern lot, and then on the western lot, you only want to do the privacy fence on the west perimeter. Was there anything else?
No, I think everything else we're in agreement with from a staff recommendation standpoint.
Any other questions?
I have a question just to clarify. Is there any fencing proposed for the east side, the storage on the east side?
Here, along here.
So it's chain link but no slats?
So there's chain link that exists along the DOT right-of-way fence up at the top of the hill, right here. And then this is an embankment that comes down about 30 feet, and this is all woods. So there would not be any fence inside this. We're asking to not require one. We feel that's excessive. Staff is asking for a secondary barrier to be installed on the perimeter of the storage yard. And I guess our point is that there's a natural barrier that exists there today with woods and the extreme slope that goes up here. There's no setback issues or anything like that from a storage yard. If this area was flatter, they would make the storage yard bigger. They're making it as, they're trying to use as much space as possible in there.
Any other questions?
So in essence, that blue line is roughly the perimeter of the storage area there.
Well, it appears we don't have any more questions at this point, so doesn't appear there's anybody else to speak in support or opposition left in the audience, so we don't have to ask, unless Carol, sorry, I didn't see you back there. That's okay. Okay. So are there any questions for staff before we close the public hearing?
Is there a big need for the bollards? I mean, if the bollards are, I mean, if the logic of the bollards was to prevent expansion of that, and they're identifying that they believe expansion will be prevented by what is essentially a 20-foot grade rise, is there another reason that there was a concern with respect to eastern expansion?
It was just merely to keep them out of the landscape area, ensure long-term health of the plantings that we're relying on for screening. If the commission feels that the grade is adequate on that side, there is substantial plantings there, there is substantial grade. I don't have as much concern on that particular side. It'd be to their own detriment to eke into their stormwater basin, but there isn't as much natural barrier there. But again, I think we were looking for belts and suspenders to ensure that storage happens where it should happen and plant material isn't damaged.
In the logic of having only the west side of that western fencing, is that a fair logic, or is there still an opposition to saying that you'd want to have all sides?
No, I trust the commission's judgment. I think that there is a lot of grade there. I would have no heartburn if the commission wanted to just limit that to maybe one of the more, a side that you might feel is more sensitive.
Madam Chair, I move staff recommendation.
Any discussion of this motion?
Is that, so that staff recommendation, which would be the denial of, sorry, that would be staff recommendation, including the denial of waiver, which is under type 2E, which is, so it would be fully opaque on the western set of fencing as opposed to just the west side of that western fencing?
Yes, it includes the.
I'll propose one kick a dead horse friendly amendment, which is that, especially in this case, this is another great example of the egregious issue we're talking about with respect to the cost of utilities. If you took that entire street, took the entire cost of doing that whole street, and then looked at the linear frontage of this site, we would not be at a $500,000 project for them, which is why I would prefer that we defer undergrounding requirements versus waive them. Because if all of a sudden we get a better plan, now this one's fully waived, we have nothing else there. But as I say, friendly amendment, which is my consistent horse kicking.
I'll go with the motion as it stands.
Okay, so the motion is staff. Any other discussion? Okay, all those in favor, raise your right hand. And all those opposed, raise your right hand. And Greg, how do you vote?
Yes.
Yes, so in favor. So
Chris, did you vote? I didn't.
Abstain.
You abstained, okay.
one abstention. So the motion, okay, what was it? 10, 2, and 1 abstention. So that concludes our agenda this evening. We have no committee or director reports?
No, nothing to add, thank you.
Okay, the meeting is adjourned.
Bye, Greg.
Thank you.